For a lot of us psychonauts, it's a rite of passage to discover the recorded talks of Terence McKenna. He had all kinds of wild speculations and ideas, but one of them that always stood out to me was this idea that the mushroom speaks. And this is a unique quality to psilocybin-containing mushrooms specifically that you don't really find with other psychedelics.
Without doubt, in my mind, the most unique feature of psilocybin is that it speaks. It speaks in your native tongue. And that is absolutely confounding to the rational mind. I mean, that's what makes a believer out of most skeptics. Because, drugs, of course, you can imagine that a drug would mess with your mind and you would see strange things. That doesn't seem too over the top. But that you could take a drug that would drop a heavy hand on your shoulder and say, "My friend, there are a few things you need to understand. Number one, number two." Meanwhile, you're bursting into tears, you're reacting furiously because it's right. It's wiser than you could have possibly imagined, and it knows you better than you know yourself. And it's not wasting time, it's cutting to the chase.
It's perceived to be the voice of some kind of detached intelligence with its own personality and even sense of humor. A fun guy, you could say. So as a young psychonaut getting interested into this stuff, I became really curious about this. Is this some kind of way to speak to an extraterrestrial? Or is there some kind of prosaic explanation, like different sections of the brain talking to itself? I decided to investigate this for myself, and the results were really fascinating. Even after my first experience of the voice, I've had this kind of experience happen to me a few other times throughout my life. Like Google or Chat GPT, I come to the mushroom when I seek some kind of illumination or clarity on something, and I get a result. I get an answer by someone or something.
The mushroom has a tremendous problem-solving ability. And because we can talk to it, we can ask it questions. We can actually get a non-human perspective on human problems.
So this video is an account of all the times that I heard the voice of the mushroom. So let's start with the first encounter that I had with the voice of the mushroom. Going into this trip, I was curious about the voice and the fabled heroic dose experience touted by Terence McKenna. So I decided to give it a shot for myself for the first time and sat alone in my room on an empty stomach and took more or less 5 grams of mushrooms, some golden teachers. I had something specific in mind that I wanted to inquire about to this voice of the mushroom, and what it was that I wanted to ask it how I could better connect with my ancestors. I had always admired the way that indigenous cultures seem to have this built-in reverence for their ancestors and even a connection with them and even a dialogue with them in some kind of afterlife spiritual way. And that's something that I feel like is lacking in modern Western culture. And so as the trip was coming on, I just went ahead and posed the question, how do I know my ancestors? And I got an answer back within less than a second, it felt like, and that was their art. And I heard it as a voice. Their art. It's really a simple idea, as art is an expression of one's consciousness and their state of mind, their internal being. Art is the highest fidelity way that we have to step into the shoes of someone else. It's the essence of our humanity. And I also got the sense that my ancestors were not limited to just genetics. In a world of ideas and ideas birthing new generations of ideas, the people whose ideas we build upon as, let's say, an artist or a musician, those are our mental ancestors, if you will. Or you could just call them the ancestors. So this experience kind of broadened my view that, like, anyone who came before me and made something and left behind a mark of, like, this was how I felt through their art and their expression, that can be thought of as your ancestor. The mushroom would go on to show me visions of alchemists working and toiling away, creating the Philosopher's Stone. And this would actually later tie into my thoughts about my ancestors, that potentially some of my ancestors were alchemists, and it was also showing me this, and it gave me something to investigate. If you want to hear the full story of this trip, I'll link it down below. This wouldn't be my only encounter with a perceived voice on a mushroom trip, but the next one wouldn't happen for another 7 years. I was hanging out with some of my friends in San Antonio, and we all decided to take mushrooms together. When you're tripping in a group setting, there's not really a lot of time for introspection and quiet and allowing yourself to explore the inner recesses of your mind. You're usually just hanging out. The only moments where I was alone was whenever I would walk into the backyard to go take a piss. Leading up to that point, I had been meditating a lot and feeling really creative and writing a lot of music. COVID had just started maybe 2 months before that, so all of my music teaching hours were cut in half. And so I spent that extra time meditating and creating. So I was really kind of in a zone. With this in mind, I heard a voice in my head giving me encouragement. I just heard something say, "You're doing a great job. Keep going. Keep going." And it was this just totally validating feeling. Like, it didn't feel like it was me patting myself on the back. It felt like whatever the presence of this mushroom intelligence is, saw what was in my mind through my meditation and my creativity, and it was saying, yes, this is the right track. This is what you're supposed to be doing. Keep going. Don't stop. And when I heard that, I just got chills through my whole body, and I was like, yes, okay, thank you. It was showing me that I was on the right path, and I was in alignment with my higher self, if such a thing exists. Maybe it's the alien overlords. Maybe it's my subconscious mind. But whatever it is, it had the authority of a compassionate and wise being. And there was zero doubt about it that it was true to me. So after multiple experiences encountering the wisdom contained in the mushroom, you begin to rely on it as a source that you can go to in times where you're seeking knowledge or illumination on something. Throughout my days as a psychonaut, I love to read Carl Jung, and one of his big ideas is this concept of the anima. So in a nutshell, the anima is like a woman that appears to you in your dreams, and it represents the total unconscious parts of your mind, which in a man are the feminine aspects of your being. But not only that, the anima is like the source of your creativity. It's your muse. So you want to be in good relations with the anima, aka integrate your feminine side. This creative feminine side is what allows us to nurture works of arts into being, like we're the mother of our creations. So after a decade of investigating that previously unconscious side of my psyche, I decided to flip it around and investigate the other side of that coin, which is the masculine side. And growing up, you're presented with a very narrow stereotype of what it means to be a man that doesn't always resonate with me. Just dumb meathead stuff, basically.
Lao Tzu says, although you may be a male, always have a certain feminine quality, and thus you will become a universal channel. That has particularly to be learned by men in the United States, who tend to overcompensate masculinity. To be ashamed of gentleness.
But there has to be some innate qualities of the masculine side that are worth preserving. So I wanted to investigate through the mushroom and find out what that meant for me. I actually got the inspiration to do this through another YouTuber named Nathaniel Drew, where his whole trip was about this topic of investigating what manhood or masculinity meant for him.
During this trip, what I saw very, very clearly, and what really stuck with me, was that I was getting caught up on this 0.1% of what it means to be a man. And really what it means to be a man is all of this. There's so much more depth to it. But I was getting caught up on this outer layer. When I close my eyes and kind of go inside, I feel a lot of masculinity. I feel solidity in that masculinity. Like I could feel that energy naturally coming out of me. And that I was just getting caught up in my head about these really weird ideas that I had, not based on reality whatsoever. I could see that being a man is so much more than the things that I was associating with it.
And I had never thought to do something like that, so I wanted to try it for myself. And here's what happened. I brought this question at the top of my mind to the mushroom during this experience, and right after the come up, like 1 hour into it, I was answered immediately. And I heard a voice tell me, protect what you love. It's a good job to have. And again, this answer was coming in clear as day. Then I proceeded to do the most manly thing possible and bawl my eyes out crying. It was such a beautiful and simple message of what it means to be a man. And this isn't a quality that is exclusive to men, but we can use our innate size difference and strength difference to protect the people that we love or the people that are most vulnerable. And that is like kind of the most high honor version of the masculine force. Later in that trip, I was pondering this headspace of a mushroom trip. And it felt like, here I am again, but I remember all the other times that I had this headspace while on mushrooms, but so much time had passed. But I came back to this space like it was always there, like it was this kind of place outside of time. So then I kind of half-jokingly asked, so what is time to a mushroom? Without necessarily seeking an answer for that, it was more like rhetorical. I got an answer that said, time is that which slips away as soon as you try to hold on. I'm like, dang, okay. So this mushroom is a fan of Zen, I see. Very, very Buddhist kind of vibe there, where it's like time is this relentless passage and there's no point in holding on because all things must pass, as George Harrison would say. But from the vantage point of the eternal now through the lens of a mushroom god, that doesn't seem to matter too much. So I want to know, do you have any experiences like Terence McKenna or me with the voice of the mushroom? Please share those experiences in the comments. I want this to be a space where we can all kind of share our experiences and know that we're not alone in these kind of things. I do want to add some nuance here because hearing voices in your head is kind of the definition of a crazy person. So there's this delicate balance that you need to strike where maybe part of your heart really wants to believe these things are true. And I know that I'm leaning towards that myself, but you have to maintain enough distance and skepticism to be like, at least open to the possibility that it could be all in your head or all kind of explained through some boring answer, essentially. So leave yourself some room because a lot of these things I don't think we'll get answers to in our lifetime, but they're absolutely worth exploring. So this video is specifically focused on the things I heard on mushrooms, but most of the time the mushroom shows me things. So if you want to hear about any of those other stories, you can either check out my Breadcrumbs to the Unconscious series or check out my trip report playlist with all of my mushroom trips.